Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome once again to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and with me, as always, is Abby from Life Work Balance. How you doing, Abby?
I'm doing well. How are you, Bill?
Oh, not too bad. This is the live stream where, if it's your first time here, this is where we talk about anything under the sun related to job search, and in particular, how to get hired in 2025. So this is an interactive Q&A type live stream. So if you are watching this from my YouTube channel or from Abby's YouTube channel, or I think you have it going on Twitch also, your Twitch. Get in the chat. Let us know what you're wondering about, what you're struggling with, and we will do our best to help you out. That's what we do. So, and as I understand it, Abby, you had something that you had to kick us off with today.
Yes. So one of the last comments that came through on our last live stream was, how do I make a great first impression at the beginning of an interview? So this is a question that should be going through everyone's minds. It is important to make a good first impression, not only at the beginning of the interview, but throughout the entire process.
Absolutely.
So, yes. So there are several things that can happen, and it's circumstantial. The way that I might interpret making a good impression might slightly differ from your interpretation of how to make a good first impression. But in general, when it comes to like first impressions during an interview, it's all about what the interviewer is perceiving about you. So you want to make sure that you look the part, that you show up professional, that you are not, completely discombobulated, your hair is brushed, you look put together. Because if you show up wearing a tank top or ripped clothing or dirty clothing, or you appear dirty, people are going to start making judgments about you.
I like that word, discombobulated. I think is that an actual word? I think that's an actual word now, isn't it? If you look it up.
I think so.
Yeah, if you like ran for a bus or something and you look discombobulated. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And while it's unfortunate that people do make those sorts of judgments about us, it's just the hard truth of the way the world works. Humans make judgments to give themselves more information and to start making decisions. And having a job interview is the time to make good impressions. And the way you look, the way that you are appearing, the way that you have prepared or haven't prepared are all going to impact how the actual interview goes and how the interviewer feels about you. So looks, the visual aspect of your interview, is one of the best ways to make a good first impression. The other is to just be prepared to start off strong with confidence and to kind of be calm and collected, which is also hard to do because during an interview, it feels like the stakes are high. It feels like this other person is making judgments about you, which they are. It feels like you have to say the right things, which you do. So there's all these like high stakes at play with interviews. So you want to be fully prepared to answer the most common interview question, which is, tell me about yourself. And I have a ton of videos on the topic of tell me about yourself. Bill and I have discussed this many times. Bill, you have videos on the topic of how to answer tell me about yourself. And if you can start strong with that answer, that will hopefully give you the confidence to continue to stay strong throughout the rest of your interview.
Yeah, first impressions are super important, like Abby said. I agree with you there. It's like if you walk into the room and you look like the person, all you have to do from that point onwards is not talk yourself out of a job. If you walk into the room and you meet everyone and you look like you're really not the person, then you got to change everybody's mind, and that's tough. You got to work against their assumptions about you or their like this whatever might be going on in their mind, their first impression. So very, very important. And as we all know, job interviews are really about what you're like as a person, not necessarily about your technical qualifications. It's very unintuitive because the questions that are asked of you in the job interview are usually about your technical qualifications, like how much experience you have and all this kind of stuff. But really, that's not why you're there. You're there because they're assessing who you are as a person. Do they like you? Can they deal with you? Can they communicate with you very easily? Do they feel like tense around you? Do they feel like you're kind of offended or upset with them, or is it just something not clicking? That's really what you're being evaluated on. I mean, you would know a lot about that, Abby. That's kind of name of the game, I think, right?
Yes. Well, and they're assuming that you can do the job based off of your application. Like you've already met the minimum criteria to do the job. So now they're bringing you in to not only determine those preferred qualifications, but ultimately your fit with the team, with your potential manager, and the organization as a whole. So most interviews will include a conversation with your direct supervisor or your potential direct supervisor. It might start off with someone who's the recruiter or who's in HR to do like an initial screening to just check overall culture fit. But then it's likely that you'll start to have more one-on-one interactions with your direct supervisor. And then maybe even a panel interview with some of your coworkers or key stakeholders that you might interact with. And it's all about how you are going to be able to build relationships and interact with them throughout your entire work experience at that location. If you don't do it well during the interview, then you're not going to be moved forward. So having a good first impression, connecting with the people that you are going to be working with is key to success in an interview.
Absolutely. And we're starting to get some questions in here. So I'm just going to jump right to this. So this is from Danelle, if I'm saying that right. Says,
Daryl, I think.
what should I do if a hiring manager on LinkedIn says she flagged my application to recruiter a month ago, but I haven't heard anything from them yet? Application still says under consideration. Well, Abby, you're the former recruiter here, so you can give me your thoughts on that.
Yes. So Darrell, if you or Daryl, let us know if you can provide some additional clarification. That might be helpful. So it sounds like you maybe submitted an application outside of LinkedIn and possibly connected with a recruiter on LinkedIn who said that they then flagged your application and then you haven't heard from them. So what I would do is follow up if that's what happened. If you submitted an application on LinkedIn and then a recruiter followed up with you and said they flagged it, again, follow up, regardless of the context of the situation, I guess. Follow up with the recruiter. It's been a month, so chances are they're probably moving forward in the process with someone else, but it doesn't hurt to just double check. And who knows, maybe they flagged your application. They thought you might be a good fit. They decided that someone else was a better fit, but now they have this other position that's coming down the pipeline that you can kind of put your name in the ring for that coming up, even though you haven't applied to it. So there's no harm with sending a follow-up email or follow-up message. You might not get a response. It might not be a response that you're looking for. It might be a rejection, or it could be something really positive. It could open the door to other opportunities.
Yeah. I mean, I recommend for pretty much everyone, if you're doing a job search campaign, I know this is easier said than done, but look forward, not backwards. So, I mean, if this was like a dream job, something you really, really had your heart set on, then I can understand, you want to follow up. You're always thinking like, what's going on? I haven't heard anything. What could they be thinking? What could they be doing? You will never know. They kind of don't want you to know also. Like Abby says, I mean, it doesn't hurt to follow up if this is like a dream job. Now, if this was like every job you apply to and you're spending time going back and like looking, what's going on with this, what's going on, then following up multiple times, I'd be concerned because that's taking you away from looking forward, looking at, what are you going to apply to today? What opportunities are you going to create for yourself and pursue today? You need to be looking ahead. And the idea is that I think in general, and Abby can give me her opinion on this, but it's my approach is, when it's a yes, somebody will contact you. You don't have to worry about that. In the meantime, if you don't hear anything, just assume it's not happening right at the moment and just keep moving forward. That's what I'd say. It also is good for your mental health rather than worrying and like hand wringing over like, what can they be doing? Instead, it's much more positive if you're applying for things because each opportunity you pursue it's a chance for something to happen. So, yeah.
Yep. And they put some additional information in the chat. So submitted an application outside of LinkedIn, found the hiring manager on LinkedIn, reached out, then followed up 2 weeks later. I think the hiring manager followed up 2 weeks later, no response, but looking ahead. So I would say if you followed up with the hiring manager 2 weeks later after you initially connected with them, and there was no response, and now it's a month after your initial connection, the silence is probably indicating no. And at the same time, like Bill said, if this is a dream job or a dream organization, it doesn't hurt to just follow up with that person, get your name at the top of their inbox or the top of their messages again, reiterate your enthusiasm for the organization or the position, and say, I totally understand if this position is in the process of being filled. If there are any other positions that you think I might be a great fit with or fit for, I would love to be considered for those. I'll continue actively applying, just something like that. There's no need to follow up with every single person that you can get in touch with. If it's, hundreds of applications and hundreds of messages, you do want to prioritize the ones that are priority for you.
Yeah, I think you could say that the chances of you getting hired are directly proportional to the number of opportunities you pursue and how well you pursue them, not in the following up. Following up definitely has a place, if it's really important, but if it's a distraction from taking you away from applying to new things and pursuing new things, then it's not a great thing to pursue. What would you say, Abby, is like, if you apply to a job, what would the normal follow-up look like? You would send a thank you note and then you'd follow up again after a couple of days, or what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, so I would say it depends. I have lots of videos on how to follow up after an interview. I think following up after an application is a little bit different because you still haven't really officially connected with a real person, unless in this case where you connect with them on LinkedIn, they send you a message. So in that case, I think the general template for following up after applying but not yet getting an interview is just reiterating your enthusiasm and why you think you might be a great fit for the role. In many cases, there's a lot of people like content creators out there who recommend providing some sort of value to the person that you've connected with first to kind of prove your worth ahead of time. And so that might be like, if I'm applying for a marketing role, I might say, here's an example of some work that I have done, looking at your goals. This might be a image that you could post on Instagram. That might be something that could take you a very short period of time that could demonstrate your value to the person, that could then prompt them to push you through the process. That's different from following up after an interview, which you want to say, thank you so much for the opportunity. Mention something that you heard during the interview that impacted you in a positive way, or that you're excited about, or that you think you could contribute to. And then if you didn't get this information confirmed during the interview, confirm some of the logistics for next steps. When do you expect to hear from them? Is it going to be a week? Is it going to be 3 business days? What did the next steps in the process look like, etc.?
Absolutely. So this is an interactive live chat. So I see there's 37 people here. Get in the chat. Let us know if you have any questions. We will do our best to answer them and help you out. So Abby, is hiring changing in 2025? Have you noticed any trends or any kind of shifts or anything new this year or in the last little bit?
Not drastically. I have noticed that things seemed like they slowed down a little bit, like the market itself slowed down. Yeah. And so now I feel like it's starting to pick back up as we get towards the middle of the year. A lot of organizations will either have their fiscal, like their financial year, start at the beginning of the year, like January, or in the middle of the year, like July. So a lot of time hiring will correspond with the fiscal calendar year for the organization. You might not know what that is, but I might not know if the organization I want to apply to is on a fiscal year, in July or whatnot. So just keep that in mind. That's something that can impact hiring. It seems like in-person interviews are becoming more popular. We went through, a complete shift from in-person to almost totally virtual when the pandemic occurred. And then we've slowly been getting back to the in-person stuff. So I know there are a lot of people out there, I'm one of them, who do not want to do in-person work. The way that the pandemic happened completely convinced me that remote work is not only feasible, but can be more productive and effective. So I'm the type of person who's like, I'm not going to apply for an in-person job. I will do in-person stuff if I need to, but I'm not going to apply for an in-person job. But lots of organizations are shifting back to full-time in-person or like 50-50 hybrid. 50% in-person, 50% virtual. So keep all of those things in mind as you're applying to jobs. Your organization might start to switch to more in-person work. And if you love the work, and switching to in-person is okay with you, great. If it's a deal breaker, you'll want to have some other things kind of up your sleeve.
I noticed when the the pandemic hit and we all went away from in person stuff. I mean, that was pretty obvious. You have to be living under a rock not to notice that. But the, like as you say, coming back to in person, I've heard conflicting stuff recently, and I think what everybody's wondering about, I don't know if there's an answer. I certainly don't have the answer, but is the recent sort of economic stuff that's been going on. I think everybody's wondering how that's affecting the job markets and stuff. It's hard to say because I think every day things switch.
Yeah.
That's been my perspective. So
Yes. Yep. And each company is also different. There's no like standard among all the companies. So it's going to be very organizational and maybe
or industries. Like
provide
some industries are going through major changes and others aren't. So it's kind of tough to say.
exactly.
Here's another one. Carlos says the job posting has a salary range of 78 to 103K, was presented an offer for 90K via call, and the HR manager stated it is the highest amount possible.
Mm.
Yeah, that's this is something that's never happened before.
Everyone's shocked that this conversation is happening.
Exactly. Yes. No. This is actually. I've heard this several times. I mean, this seems to be. I've heard this several times more recently. So I don't know if it's like a trend or something. Can I negotiate based in the job salary posting? Absolutely. You can negotiate. You can say whatever you want, Carlos. I mean, that's the thing. Now, I would want to know for a start. Are you at the beginning of the process here, or have you gotten an offer, or like where are you in this? Because if this is the beginning, in my opinion, you really shouldn't get into specifics of salary. You should try and not give a number or not discuss it. And if they try and force you into discussion, just deflect it. I can't say, I need more details. What is the salary range? Things like this. They say, well, this is the range. You say, okay, hey, somewhere in there would be fine for me, and leave it at that. And just don't allow them to push you into a corner and give a number. That would be my recommendation.
Well, and I think that you just said a phrase that is really critical to knowing what's going on here. So the salary range might be the full range of the position, not the hiring range. So Carlos put in the chat, the job posting has a salary range of this. So if this is earlier in the conversation, and I guess even later in the conversation, you might want to confirm by saying the job posting had this salary range listed. Is this different from the hiring range? If they say yes, our hiring range is 78.2K to 90K, then you know that you're at the top of the hiring range and there's probably not much room for negotiation. However, not attempting to negotiate could hurt you. So there are other things you can negotiate beyond just compensation. So that's one thing that you want to keep in mind. You can negotiate, depends on the organization. Some are way more flexible with this than others, usually private versus public. Private have a little bit more wiggle room with some of these things, but you might be able to negotiate paid time off. So your rate of accrual of paid time off, maybe you start with a bank of days versus starting at zero and having to accrue from nothing. Maybe you can negotiate how much they contribute towards your retirement plans. If there's a matching, maybe you can negotiate how much they contribute towards health insurance. So there's lots of things that you can negotiate, even remote work. Maybe this is a hybrid job and they say it's 50-50 in person, 50-50 remote. And you can negotiate to maybe 75% remote, 25% in person. So there's lots of things that you could negotiate beyond just salary. So you want to consider the total compensation that you'll be offered. So if this is towards the end of the process, asking them if you could get their benefits summary is likely a multiple page document that has retirement information, health insurance information, PTO and sick leave information, like all of that in a single document, where then you can compare that to what you currently have, the experience that you bring, and use some of those other things as negotiation topics or points rather than just the salary.
Yeah, salary negotiation there's so many dimensions to it. It's very complicated. It's very hard to sort of lay down some general rules here because it really does vary. I mean, for a start, I think this is interesting. I think that, if they put a range on the job posting and then they're acting in I would interpret it as a disingenuous way by turning around and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. I know that's what we said, but it turns out that, we can only pay this much." And it's like, okay, this is really not a good start. This is not a good first impression that you would be getting as a candidate. It's like, okay, so you're giving me a great impression that you're really two-faced here. You're saying one thing and then you're turning the tables on me. Okay. First of all, two can play this game. Secondly, now, if you know that, like, I'm sure, Carlos, you have some idea of what would be a reasonable ask for the position. Now, like, it turns out that, like, you were making 98 or something at your last position, and here they are saying, well, the highest we can go is 90. And I mean, the obvious thing is like, well, I'm only here because you said you went up to 103, so if that's no longer the case, then, thank you for your time, kind of thing, right? So either these people are doing something malicious where they're intentionally being misleading, or they're so incompetent and disorganized by, like, changing their story now that they've got you here, especially in light of what we were just talking about how face-to-face interviews are coming back. And, you showed up to a job interview in good faith, and now they're just changing the story on you. You know what I mean? And this stuff does matter because you have very little interaction with these people, and this is your first interaction, and they're doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So listen,
what can happen from a, like, back end perspective, if a recruiter is building a job posting, I would say that this type of confusion is actually more on the recruiter than on the hiring manager and your potential team. Because what will happen is when you're building a job posting, you will likely put in the job, like, profile to be posted, and then you'll make some edits to the actual language to be more specific for the actual job. So, like, for example, there might be an administrative assistant job profile for an entire organization. They might have 100 different administrative assistant jobs. And so that job profile is just the basic framework of the minimum qualifications and the requirements to do an administrative assistant job. Well, if they have 100 different administrative assistant positions, you could write 100 different job descriptions. And so that job description change should occur when the recruiter is helping the hiring manager post this job. Now, most applicant tracking systems and programs that post the jobs will automatically pull the information from the job profile, which is the same for every administrative assistant position, which means the salary range will be the same for every administrative assistant position, but the hiring range might be slightly different. So it is probably an oversight by the recruiter for not clarifying the hiring range. Now, my question would be, is it policy to not clarify the hiring range? Colorado in 2021, which is where I'm located, went through a law change where they required organizations post pay information. It was for pay transparency. And many organizations just posted the salary range, not the hiring range, because they didn't want people to self-select out of applying to a job because the hiring range was less than what the job posting range was. So it was sneaky. And that's where you'd want to understand maybe what happened so that this job, the hiring range, wasn't posted versus the salary range. Because if you had known that the top out was 90, would you have applied? And if the answer is no, then this might not be a good fit.
I agree. I think Abby's got some great insight into how this stuff kind of works on the back end that's kind of hidden from the job seeker. It does all add up to the same thing, though. I mean,
Yep.
You're going on the information they're presenting, and the information they're presenting apparently has changed, and it was inaccurate. So, you know what I mean? We got a lot of other questions, so I don't want to labor this point, but that's a great thing. Did we actually answer the question here? Can I negotiate based on the job salary posting? Yes, absolutely, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt to have the conversation, because if at this point, if the answer from them is no, and they only will give you 90, will you take it? And you can attempt to negotiate. Maybe you get some other compensation aspects modified. But if you will not take it and they give you a hard no that they can't negotiate, then it's perfectly acceptable to amicably end the conversation and move forward to the next opportunity.
It's acceptable to amicably do that, yes. I would recommend that, like, listen, if they don't eliminate you, if they want to talk to you further, um, I would pursue it. So, like, I wouldn't say anything in the interview. You got to really, this is something that all job seekers should be prepared for, by the way. This is a great opportunity to talk about this. Like, let's say they sprung this on you in the interview, or anything that was like kind of bad news for you. Okay. Oh, we forgot to mention this job, you have to relocate, or, something like that, like anything like that. If you sort of have a very visible negative reaction, like your body language or whatever, you kind of like, get like visibly annoyed or upset or whatever, like that's very detrimental. That's very bad. Okay. What I'd recommend is, like, try not to do that. Try and, like, just inside, you could be very, very disappointed. You could be upset. Like, why am I even here if you're going to pull a fast one on me? But don't show anything. And I would pursue it. Since you're already here, you might as well see where it leads. Okay. So do everything in your power to present yourself in the best possible light, pursue it as far as it'll go, and see if you can get to the offer stage. And then at the offer stage, I think it would be worth it to just say, like, if you really need like 100 or whatever, I would say then, like, let them pick you, let them in their mind resign themselves to the fact that you're the one that's going to be in this role. And then that's when you turn around, you say, like, absolutely, I'm excited about this. Great, great, great. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Vacation's fine. Everything's fine. I need you to pencil in this number. And then you got a deal, and just see, because then at that point, when they will feel pain, if they now have to go with somebody else, there's a chance that they could get that approved if that's some internal thing that they weren't wanting to do.
Yeah.
and go with it. You know what I mean? Like, that does happen. So since you're already there and it is a bite, and presumably you do want the job to a degree, that's why you're there, I would see if you can take it to that level, rather than just saying, I'm sorry, this is not worth my time to be here. Goodbye. Because you could have been giving up something that would have worked out if you had just stayed strong, and negotiated properly.
Yep. So in this case, if you're communicating via email, which hopefully you are, because then you have everything in writing and you can go back to that in the future if you need to, saying, thank you so much for the offer. I was under the impression that the hiring range for the position was this to this. Are you saying that there's no room to negotiate on the salary for this? If that's the case, is there, room for negotiation with other aspects such as, X, Y, and Z? And so you do want to confirm that type of information. There was another question right below Mike's comment that's sort of on the same topic of negotiating salary. So maybe we'll jump around a little bit.
Below Mike's comment?
Yeah. So Internet Vibes 34 says, okay, should an entry-level person have the power to negotiate salary? Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you don't try, then you're just going to get the bare minimum that they're going to offer you. And even though you are entry level, you're still bringing something to the table. So you do want to be prepared. You want to do research on the market. You want to know what the typical salary range is for people with your education or background or skills, even if it is entry level. If I'm going to be working at a local fast food chain, they still likely have a salary range for the same type of position. So always attempt to negotiate. If you don't, then that changes your pay trajectory for your entire future.
But learn how to do it right. Like, don't go in there and just demand like a lot of money, like first thing in the first interview or something. You know what I mean? Like learn to do it correctly. Right. Mm-hmm. But yes, you definitely have the power. You don't need anyone's permission. You can ask for anything you want. You are, what is it? What's the poem? I am the captain of my soul, or whatever it is, Invictus. Yeah. You can do whatever you want. And a lot of people are rewarded for that, mm-hmm. rather than the whole stay in your lane, wait your turn kind of thing. You have the right to ask for anything. The caveat is that they have the right to say no. So just, the more you learn about this process, the more successful you will be.
Yep. And you ideally want to do this type of research on salary before you begin the interview process, because they could surprise you at any moment and ask mm-hmm. you about pay. And so you want to be fully prepared to justify why you believe you are worth the higher amount.
Absolutely. Mike says, doing my first internship at a Big Four firm in a few months. It's a basic audit internship. I'd like to advance to a more challenging internship at the same firm afterwards. Any advice on how to behave? Well, I'll kick this off. Yeah, go in there and have the right attitude, because an internship a lot of times is almost like a probationary thing for hiring people. Like it's like a pool of people. Now, if you're a company, a great way to to reduce the risk of hiring a new employee is to have them come in, give a sample of what they're like, what their work ethic is, and if they jive with your culture and everything, and then you pick the ones you like, right? So go in there and be super positive, be friendly, say hi to everybody. um, Go to your boss or supervisor every couple of weeks, just one on one. I recommend like immediately after lunch on a Friday. It's probably a good time when they're not stressed out and busy and you're not bothering them. And just, knock on their door if they got an office or whatever, and just say, hey, you got a couple of minutes, and then go and just say, like, so how am I doing? Is there something that I'm doing that, you would prefer that I do it a different way or something? I'm just looking for some basic feedback. You know, just something like that. Just, and then that's a great sort of platform for them to say, actually, you're doing pretty good, but there is one thing. If you could do this a different way, and that way that you signal a bunch of good things, and then you also improve your performance. And while you're there, just try and be friendly and positive and accommodating and approachable to all the people around you. And that will really help you out. They will probably want you to continue with them if that's a possibility.
Yep. It's all about perceptions. And so you want to have a really positive personality. You want to say yes to everything. The way I think about internships,
No matter what it is,
yeah,
just say yes.
yes.
Only
We'll
good
put
things
some
will come.
disclaimers out there if people need it. But you want to, like, when I think about an internship, the goal is to really just build your skill set in a specific area. So an internship is usually where you might have a little bit more oversight. You might have someone who's like kind of guiding you through the process. You might have specific projects that you're working on. However, that doesn't mean that you have to be contained to only those things. So be proactive. Look around you. If you see areas that you might be able to improve a process or think innovatively to do something differently, you do it. And, for example, like I'm actually on Wednesday, I'm going to post a video about what to do in your first day and then your first 30, 60, and 90 days once you're hired into a position. And that's one of my pieces of advice is like identify a small thing that you can do that can have a relatively positive impact on your team, whether it's your direct coworkers, your supervisor, etc. And the example that I give is maybe you find a file folder that's disorganized and you take 20 minutes to just alphabetize it or reorganize it. While it might take 20 minutes of your time, it can really make everyone else's lives a lot easier. So find things that are proactive for you to do that are like small but meaningful tasks that will ultimately impact everyone. And then network. As an intern, you are in a position to sit down and pick your direct supervisor's brain, pick your coworkers' brains or your potential equal or people who are kind of lateral in the organization with you. You have the ability internally to identify other teams that you could work on in the future. So find those managers and those supervisors and just start to build some relationships with them. You're not stepping on people's toes. You're not, not doing the work that you were hired to do for the internship because you're doing other things, but you're just starting to shake hands, introduce yourself, put a face to the name, give them an idea of the stuff that you can do so that when that more advanced opportunity comes along, they think of you, someone who they already know, who's in the organization, who has started to build relationships with them that they can put into that position rather than someone who is completely unknown.
Yeah, there's other things you can do, like in addition to kind of what we're talking about. You can walk out of there with references, with letters of recommendation, and with referrals. So, like Abby says, like when she says network, go talk to your boss, go talk to people around you, that preferably above you, and hit them up for that kind of stuff. So before you leave there, you hit up several people, and say, can I use you as a reference? Would that be okay? Can you give me your phone number, email address, that kind of thing. Would you be comfortable writing me a recommendation, on LinkedIn or just like in a letter, that I could use? We've been working together in a limited capacity, and if that worked for you, would you be comfortable doing that? Now, a lot of people are going to say no, or it's just not going to work out because that requires effort, right? But if you hit up multiple people that you've had some interaction with, you could get like one or two or three of them out of that, right? So when you walk out of there, you will have these to help you. And not only that, but while you're there, while you're talking to these people, you can also go after referrals. So like say, I'm looking for something in this field, like what's your take, like what, where's this industry going, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they have connections, people that they work with regularly at other firms that could use, someone in audit, right? You know what I mean? So like they could say, oh, well, I actually, there's this company here that they might be looking for someone. It's like, oh, do you deal with them regularly? Yes, I do actually. So, there's like a link up right there. So you can get all this kind of stuff while you're there so that when it's over, if they don't hire you directly and say, well, you want to stay on as an employee, you have all these other things that are going to create opportunities for you. There's a lot to this actually. The other thing I wanted to say was, in my limited experience with like audit, like financial audit or other types of audit, in my limited experience, it seems to attract two types of people. One are people, first are people that like, they want to make a lot of money. So they've heard that you go into that and that leads to great things. It may not suit their personality necessarily, but that's what they do. Other people, their calling is audit. They are an inspector. They take this stuff very seriously. If you're not following procedure, it's their life's mission to identify that and to call you on it because they take it very seriously. Those types of people, in my experience, I can relate to them. One of their failings is that they don't take ad hoc deviations in procedure well. So if they were hired for audit and then their boss comes to them and says, hey, can I get you to do this other thing that doesn't involve audit just for a couple of days? A lot of people, their natural reaction will be like, what? That's not my job. I'm here to do this. Don't have that reaction. Be more accommodating. Force yourself, like Abby says, to say yes to a lot of things, that they might throw at you. And that way you get the impression of being someone who can rise to a challenge and is more flexible. And they're always looking for people like that, not rigid people that only technically do one thing. That's all they're interested in doing. And they won't want to do work outside of that.
Yeah.
So that's another element that may or may not apply to you.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm starting to lose track here. So we skipped around. Did we do this?
We did that one. And then
Amaze
has two comments, but the most recent one right below this one is
this the one we're on here? Amazed?
Yep. But there's one comment right below, which is just a little bit, it's the same question.
Okay. So we'll do these two. So amazed. Okay. So it's hello. Would it be effective to reiterate any key points I may have missed during the interview and a thank you note to the recruiter? Absolutely. As far as I'm concerned, let me know if you'd like a more formal or more casual tone. Okay.
I would keep it formal. You're still making a good impression from a professional standpoint. I don't think that you want to focus too much on what you may have missed during an interview because it might be turn into too long of an email or a note back to them. I do think that if, there was some confusion or you feel like you left out something that was huge that could really impact their decision, including a little note about it at the end is perfectly fine or within your thank you note. But I got
distracted on the word reiterate. I thought you were repeating something you'd already said, but then you said the points I may have missed. So that implies you didn't say them. So I agree with Abby if you're talking about stuff you haven't mentioned.
Yes. So it really depends. You want to reiterate your enthusiasm for the position. You might want to reiterate why you're such a great fit for it. If there are points that you have missed, tread lightly. You don't want to, say, I missed telling you about these 17 things and list them off. You might want to highlight the most important one that you think could impact if they decide to move forward with you or not.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, Undisclosed user says, when applying for a new job and providing your salary expectation, how do you ask for the other aspects of compensation, such as vacation, holidays, and other incentives? Also, how can you negotiate? Oh, that's a how much time do you got? That would take hours. Well, the short answer is you can ask for that stuff. I don't think there's necessarily any harm for it, but personally, I would recommend that you just don't get into it during the interviews. Like, compensation has a lot of dimensions to it. For a start, the things you mentioned, you got your salary, like your base pay. There might be performance pay of some kind, like a bonus or profit sharing thing. You've got vacation days, possibly sick days, a benefit package, like Abby mentioned. I mean, there's multiple dimensions, and it goes even further from that, because maybe some people might not be able to budge on salary, but they could give you a signing bonus. So they just give you like a check for signing on. Even though you get a lower salary, you get like a bump right when you start. That may be possible. So, there's a lot to this. And all I would say, if you're saying, how can you negotiate? I would say, make them fall in love with you first. Get them to pick you. So that means don't try and do any of this stuff early in the process. Wait till you get a job offer, okay?
Yes.
And then you can worry about negotiation. Because if you try and negotiate like before that, while they're talking to a whole bunch of other candidates, they'll just probably eliminate you on the grounds that you're asking for more money, and they'll just go with somebody else who hasn't
This
asked.
person is too interested in compensation and not interested in what we do and the mission that we're driving toward.
And that's another factor. Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would recommend that you, unless they bring it up, you don't bring it up until you're towards the end and you're actually in the process of negotiating, because you don't want to be too focused on the money. In most cases, at least with the job postings that I'm familiar with, they will list like a brief overview of some of their benefits. And then you can do some Google research and try to dig a little bit deeper into it. There might be organization or platforms like Glassdoor that actually post this information from previous employees. Maybe they have the benefits summary that you can download directly from HR's website. So do some research on your own to see if you can find out what that information is ahead of time. And then if you get into the negotiation process towards the end, once you've gone through the interviews and now they're in the offer process, then it's time to say, the salary listed on the job was XYZ. Could you also give me some additional information on the other benefits that your organization offers? Like, it can be that simple. You don't have to ask for specific things, just other benefits. I usually would request. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I interrupted you I was just going to say, if you can affect an Italian accent and sound like the Godfather, that helps too. I can't do it. I've never actually seen that movie, but I've seen all the impressions. Yes. You're going to need some cotton balls.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, and I think ultimately what it comes down to is it's as simple as just asking them for the benefit summary. And they should have from HR a formal document that is a high level overview of like the percentages and the amounts of all the things.
Have your people send it over to my people. Yep. My team will get back. Alex says, hello, last job. Sorry, I can't pronounce it. Kyocera Avix in automotive cables lasted 4 days to me and no training. That they should give you some kind of a medal for that, Alex. Tomorrow I'm going at hella interview with a test. I don't like tests. You're not the only one. How to see tests as a positive thing? Well, they give you experience in writing tests, I suppose. That's a good thing. I'm entry level. Okay, listen, Alex, it's okay. Look, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And that's okay, because it really has not much to do with you. It's more to do with the employer, right? Some places you will fit what they just happen to be looking for. Other times they just happen to be looking for something completely different. You have no control over that. You have no knowledge really of what they're looking for. You know what I'm saying? So don't worry about it too much. Just do your best. Go down, and if they want you to take a test, just take the test. Hey, it might be an interesting experience. It'll certainly give you some experience with these things. So if this doesn't work out, next time it has a higher likelihood of working out because you've been through it before, right? But yeah, that's what I would say. Best of luck to you.
Yeah. And when it comes to taking tests, there's multiple reasons why organizations might use it. Many times it is to filter out people who say they have the skills, but don't really have the skills. So if you do have the skills to do the job, then the assessment or the test should be something that you can easily pass. It shouldn't really, I'm assuming this is more skills based and not necessarily like a psychological test to see what personality type you are. But if you can do the job, then passing the test should not be a problem. So remind yourself that you got this. You might have some education or some previous experience that's going to set you up to be able to do these things effectively. Take a deep breath. If you don't know what box breathing is, it's a breathing technique that I would recommend you look up a
Is that where
YouTube
you
video
breathe
on.
into the paper bag, like that kind of thing?
No, but you like
No?
imagine kind of a box and you like do a count of 4 inhale, a count of 4 hold, a count of 4 exhale. So there's this whole process of being able to re-regulate your system when it's dysregulated. So when I'm feeling anxious and nervous and worried and I'm starting to get myself spun up and my brain is going into blackout mode and I can't remember anything, if you just take a moment to ground yourself, do some breathing techniques, remind yourself that you've got this, then hopefully the rest falls into place.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fun process. It's a fun process, you know, and it's a highly random process too. And just to level with you, Alex, nobody's asking this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Another reason that they get candidates to take tests sometimes this is unspoken. It's because nobody wants to take the responsibility if they picked a candidate and hired them, and then that candidate didn't work out. They can always just say, "Hey, they passed the test, the other ones didn't, so not my fault." That's also some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes.
It could be a scapegoat.
Zita, that just rolls off the tongue. Says, "Hi, my previous contract in company A was not extended. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Now I'm applying to a new company, B." That's a catchy name. "And I just learned that I was making a certain parts for them. Should I say this during the interview?"
Yes.
It seems like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Any connection that you can have to them by understanding their process, understanding their communication policies, understanding the things that they were building or that they were putting together that you were contributing to, will put you at an advantage to someone who has no connection. So use all the things to your advantage that you have available. Name drop it. For sure, do it.
Yeah. The more link ups, the more connections, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So absolutely. Mike says, "Thank you very much for your advice." You're absolutely welcome, Mike. Thank you for being here and asking such intelligent things. Reese is here. Reese says, "I found a company owner that is willing to hire me as a trainee, and he wants me to learn how to build panels and program by myself. He said he won't teach me and I'll have to do it myself." Okay. Have you heard of this before? Let me just see if I understand that. He's willing to hire you, but he doesn't want to train you, right? Is that my understanding here?
That's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
like a red flag.
Now it depends. The devil's in the details. Like, I mean, if this is
Yeah.
something that's like just a little bit of a stretch and it's perfectly reasonable, then yeah,
Yeah.
obviously it's okay. But if it's something you've never done before and it seems like a really big deal to learn, I mean, I would say yes and just go for it and see how it works out.
Yeah. They said yes, just a little bit further down in the chat.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
responded and said yes.
Okay. There we go. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And so I would agree. If this is like a pretty straightforward position and like maybe they have a new software that they're wanting you to learn because they don't know it and you're going to have to train yourself, like that is okay. So I would confirm like if it's that. But it could also be something that's like liability. So I don't know exactly what you're doing. You say build panels and program by myself. The like first thing that comes to mind for me is like electrical stuff, and that could be like a major liability where you would definitely not want to self-teach how to do electrical panels and programming for things like that. You don't like that's something you should be trained on. So it's probably not electrical, but that's just what's coming to mind to me when I see panels. So I think it's perfectly acceptable to clarify that and then say, okay, if you don't have this type of plan for me and you're wanting me to self-teach, let's talk about what your expectations are, what the goals are, and I would like check-ins, that this is scary to me.
Well, I'm okay. Once again, it depends on the details. I mean, if you're a fully qualified electrical technician or electrician or
Mhm.
technologist or whatever you are, then it's not that much of a stretch. If you're familiarizing yourself with, I don't know, like a certain type of panel or something, its configuration. I mean, that's perfectly reasonable. But if it's like Abby was implying, if there's a situation where you are not trained on safety, this is something you've never done before, and they want you to wire a panel, you know what I mean. That can be highly unreasonable
Mhm.
and unethical, depending on depending on the details. So
Yeah.
just
Now, if it's a completely other thing and this is like just a small project where they want you to self-teach, totally feasible. So, yeah, those details really matter. And I would say if you have this like gut feeling that this isn't going to work for you or that this is fishy or that it shouldn't be going this way, then I also would kind of tune into that feeling and say thanks, but no thanks.
yeah, it depends on it. But I'd say just as a final word, um, I would I would show up for this, like if that's what we're talking about, and see how it goes. But keep in your mind, like be well aware of the reality, which is that nobody can force you to do something that's unsafe or that you're not comfortable is safe. I mean, we're in different countries here, but I'm not so sure how it works in the US, but I know that they have that legal framework in place in some way, shape, or form. I know in Canada we certainly do. All workers have the right to refuse dangerous work. They can't fire you for it. So I'd go down, I'd see what the deal is, and I'd roll with it unless you feel unsafe in any way. So,
And they
yeah.
put in the chat, they just clarified it's lower voltage panel work that doesn't require a journeyman's license in my state. It's not illegal. It's just a big skill gap.
Okay, I'd say go for it. I mean, I'm an
Ah,
electrical guy, so I'd say go for it. It doesn't seem like there's any real danger here. Just the only danger is you wire a panel wrong and it shorts out and it's not effective. They'd have to redo the work. So it seems pretty low risk.
and I would say that if it's a big skill gap, but you feel comfortable with the challenge and you are comfortable that you could do the work,
Yeah,
then it's very possible that this could work out in your benefit.
and no offense to electricians out there or electrical technologists, but some of this stuff is really not rocket science. It's not brain rocketry. You can learn from videos and things like, that's how you route all the wiring. That's the schematic. And, this is how you crimp, stuff. It's like, yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
The question is, what's your skill level and all this kind of stuff. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
okay. Hopefully that makes sense. Christian says, I'm attending a job fair on Wednesday and I'm wondering how to approach it since I'm hoping to network as much as I can. What are your thoughts?
And
I
then he
don't know
says
if you
right
have
below that I don't want to make it awkward.
take it away, Abby. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Introduce yourself to as many people as possible. Bring lots of copies of your resume. And if you have a business card, that might be even better. A business card is much easier to keep track of than like a full sheet of paper. But I would bring both if you've got them, or be prepared to share like your LinkedIn profile URL, not URL, but QR code that they can connect with you and you can connect with them. I would, if you have the information ahead of time, scan the list of employers and then prioritize based off of which one is most important to you. So they might have like a map of where each of the employers will be located in the building. They might just have a list of who's going to be there. Look at that. See what types of jobs they have available already on their website. See what types of jobs they have working for that organization. Do some research ahead of time so that when you approach the person at the booth, whether it's a recruiter, an HR person, maybe even the hiring manager, or someone who could be doing the job, you're prepared to talk about that organization and how you're going to be a good fit for them and the types of jobs that you could do. So you're not just going to walk up and be like, hi, talk to me about your jobs. You want to be very intentional about approaching these people. Say, like, oh, I just saw on your website that this is a new project that you're working on. I'm really interested in that. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? So, some of those people may not have as much insight if they truly are just like HR recruiter people. But if you can be more personalized in the way that you approach them, that will leave a bigger impact. They'll be more likely to follow up with you, I bet.
Now, I haven't been to a job fair in a very long time, but I've been to a lot of trade shows, and I imagine it's very similar. You have like lots of companies. They each have, like Abby said, they each have a booth. They have a presence there, and they're all kind of like side by side. And if it's like a huge place, and you are interested in one or two of the bigger employers, like that might make a lot of sense to kind of get a map and find out where they are in this giant, venue. But basically what I imagine you're going to be doing is you're going to be going from booth to booth. And what you do is you just walk up and you say, hey, how's it going? So what's going on with you guys? Like, what are you guys doing? And then just let them talk, and then as they say stuff that is interesting to you, you could maybe ask them a question about that and whatever, see what they say. Right. But whatever they say, wow, that's great. Whatever. And then, like Abby said, if you come armed with resumes or business cards, either is fine. You can take out a business card, you give it to them at the end. You say, well, it's very nice to have met you. Thank you very much. It was very interesting. And then give them a card or a resume. And that's usually the cue for them to give you a card or something of like a brochure, something of theirs. So you walk away ideally with a record of who you spoke to, right? And what company it was and all their contact information. And then just go booth to booth. And if there's like a booth with like a ton of people around it, but there's a few others with less people there, I wouldn't wait in line, trying to talk to someone at like one of the busier ones. I would spend that time going to the other booths and just talking to people immediately. Just engage as many people as you possibly can in conversation. That's why they're there. They're there to interact with candidates like yourself. And all you have to do is you go up, you say, hi, how's it going? And then ask them a question about like, so, what are you guys doing? It's a matter of asking a couple of key questions and then just letting them talk. Yep. And, there's really not that much skill involved. Appear interested when they talk to you, and try and get like a business card or something before you end the interaction, and just lather, rinse, repeat. Just do that to as many people there as you possibly can. And that would probably be a good day at the job fair, I imagine.
And I would recommend, hopefully you get one of their business cards and then you follow up with them proactively. What likely could happen with the job fair is they're there to more just like spread the word about their organization and say, we've got these different jobs. I would say of the job fairs I've been to, most of the organizations are not there to actively recruit for positions. So you're probably not going to get an immediate email follow-up by saying, we want you to apply to this job, or I've connected, I've sent your resume to this hiring manager. So you'll want to do an extra step to indicate your enthusiasm or your proactivity for applying to the organization or the role afterwards. So it is key to, when you're exchanging your information with them, that you get their information so you can do that follow-up.
Absolutely. Reese is here. Reese says, where is it here? Okay, so this was the panel thing. It's lower voltage. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about that. Nita M says, I wasn't able to work the schedule a job offered. I gave them the schedule I could work, and they agreed. They also agreed to let me work a hybrid schedule. Should I get this in writing? It would be nice if you could. Yes.
Yep, I would agree. There's you're protecting yourself when you get it in writing. And while we want to believe that we're not going to be, jacked around when it comes to things like this, when you have it in writing, then your chances of being able to stay true to that agreement are much higher.
Yeah, I imagine the easiest way for them to do it is if they mention this to you in some kind of face-to-face interaction or like, video call or something like that. That's where they said this. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could say, if you could send me an email just stating that in writing, I'd really appreciate it. And then see if they do it, to be a convenient way of them to do it. I think that would be the best thing.
Or the other option is to send the follow-up email yourself. So, I just wanted to follow up on our conversation we had earlier. You mentioned X, Y, and Z. I wanted to confirm. And then they reply yes. And then you've got their confirmation to that right there. it will be better if it comes directly from them, but worst case scenario, if you've got it in writing to them confirming to what you've agreed on, then you should be good to go.
Absolutely. Hashim says, I think that having an MBA has not helped in seeking a job. Well, it depends on what job you're going for. And secondly, here's kind of the thing about MBAs. I mean, I have an MBA. It's weird in terms of hiring because you see, first of all, there's a lot of people that they get an MBA and then they think, oh, you should instantly make me the boss. I should be hired as the boss, like right off the hop. And it doesn't work like that. Certainly having the theory like of business knowledge is very useful, but there's a couple of things in there. If you have an MBA and you're looking for a job, an assumption that the person on the other end is going to make is that you will not be happy being a worker. You'll have to be someone in charge. You want to be a manager. That's the assumption. Now, that may not be true, okay? But that's the assumption that people are going to make. It's like being overqualified. They figure we don't want to hire you in a role as like a grunt because you will not be happy with that. It won't be a good fit. Despite what you may say, you will probably leave shortly after we hire you in that position. And there's nothing you can really say to sort of like dispel that assumption they're making, right? Now, so that's the problem with getting hired for like a worker type. Now, if you're applying for a job as a manager and you say, I want to be in charge and I have an MBA, right? You're up against some other sort of elements there because for a start, just having an MBA doesn't mean that you have good judgment, which is the number one thing that you need if you're going to be making decisions, right? So the thing that they will want to see accompanying that MBA is relevant experience in a manager type role that's very, very similar, if not identical to what you're applying for. And if you don't have that, the MBA by itself probably won't be seen as enough qualification for that. Mm-hmm. So the way to sort of do it, in my opinion, as a sort of general thing, and I'm interested to hear what Abby says about this, is I think you have to sort of get in at the worker level, maybe, not advertise the fact that you have an MBA, show that you know what you're doing, and then get your manager job through networking, essentially. And they will consider you qualified if you have the MBA and you have some kind of personal recommendation from someone they trust that you know your stuff and that you make good decisions.
Yes. And I would say these days, I've noticed a shift of employers valuing education less and putting more emphasis on experience. Now, that's not saying that people aren't valuing education. It's just saying that they're realizing that having a bachelor's degree or a master's degree likely isn't necessary to be able to do the job well. So education requirements are becoming a little bit less extreme. So if an MBA is required for the job, then you certainly do want to advertise it on your resume and on your application. Sometimes, like, gosh, I'm blanking on what the typical language is, but it's basically like if you have equivalent experience or education, which could be anything. I might apply for a job that requires a degree in, I don't know, finance, but I have a degree in psychology and I can say that it's equivalent in this way. So there could be equivalencies out there. I think that if you don't have the experience and you fully are relying on your education to kind of prove that you're going to be a good fit for the job, you're not going to get it. You will need to demonstrate through your experience, which ultimately is why you're having these interviews, to show that you're going to be a good fit for the role beyond just the education and the background that you've got, the theoretical background that you've got. They want to know that you can put this theory into practice and that you actually do know how to manage people through experience. Maybe you have like references almost like from people who you've supervised, or maybe you have a leadership philosophy, or you have an example of a project that you've done. Like, all of those things matter more than the piece of paper that you got showing that you have the education. So it's not going to hurt you necessarily, unless you are using it as your like proof that you're going to be able to do the job, because education is only part of the equation.
Yeah, see, like not to beat this to death or anything, but what a lot of people don't realize about that whole debate between like is an MBA necessary and all this kind of stuff is that um like look, let's say you have a boss, okay? And like maybe they're a manager or something, and then you have a subordinate and the boss is retiring or something or being transferred, so you have to replace them. And you have a subordinate who doesn't have an MBA, and the argument goes like, well, I could just get that employee to shadow the boss for like a few months,
Mm-hmm.
follow them around, see them do their entire job, ask them questions like what are you doing, why are you doing it like that, have them explain, and then the subordinate is ready to step into their boss's shoes when they leave, right? So people do this and then they conclude, oh, well, you see, an MBA is necessary, you don't need to go to school to learn this, right? Now that does work and that might be preferable in a situation where maybe it's a mature industry and you do what your boss did and that's fine, it still works, it's still the right thing to do. That industry is not changing very quickly. But what do you do if all of a sudden something changes? There's new technology, there's new regulations, there's new competitors, there's new economic conditions, whatever, and all of a sudden the way that your boss has done stuff for years, all of a sudden that stops working. You don't have the education to know what is the thing most likely to work in this new situation. So you have no choice but to do trial and error or just like ask around, what are you doing? What are you doing? Is it working? That kind of stuff. And and that's where we see where the lack of education hurts people, right? So, I mean, they're both very important. Experience is very important. Education is very important. But this is why you would choose like an experience heavy person over an education heavy person, or not. You know what I mean? It depends on the situation. If you're facing new situations that you don't have a lot of experience with, seeing what other people have done is irrelevant, because you have to read the situation, come up with a new course of action. And that's the position where something like an MBA will help you. Now, the problem is a lot of people hiring for these positions, especially in large organizations, they don't have a clue about any of this. So they're just going off like, do you care about an MBA, or you don't care about MBA. So, okay, we won't either, and it just, you know what I mean? Like there's no logic to it. It's just the culture of that organization. And that's on them, whether they do it right or not. It's for them to succeed, to sink or swim. And you're just caught up in it. But if you're trying to get a job, this is kind of a bit of a catch-22. So I would say, just because you have an MBA, don't think that you don't have to start from the bottom and work your way up. You can work your way up quickly with an MBA, but you still have to earn the trust and show everyone that they can rely on you and that you have sound judgment when you make management decisions. Because there's a lot of people that have MBAs that are put in management positions where they have a lot of authority and a lot of responsibility, and they get it so wrong, it's laughable.
Yes.
And they're so arrogant about it, thinking they know it all because they've been to school. That's definitely a part of it, not all of it. So it's a very unique challenge to get into the job market on the strength of having an MBA. There's a lot to that. Yeah. Anyway, we have to wrap this up very, very soon. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, and I would be interested for Hashim to know, like, from my perspective, if I were working with you as a career coach, I would be interested to know what your resume looks like. I would be interested to know what types of jobs you're applying to. And I would like to know if you're getting interviews and how those interviews are going. So that's like sort of the types of things that we would discuss if we were working together to try to diagnose what might be going on. Because it's probably not just your NBA helping you versus not helping you. There's probably some other things that are going on in the background, and figuring out what those are and how to fix them so that you can have more success in your job search would be important.
Can we try and quickly finish these up? Because I know you got to get rolling there, Abby. Let's see if we can do this.
So we have two more questions come through the chat. So after those two, we'll wrap it up.
Yes. Okay. Tommy says, How do I get ahead or apply to a job posting on time? I've been getting rejection emails over the last week, and it's mostly because they already found their candidate and I applied too late.
It depends. So you want to keep your job hunt kind of continuously going, even when you're in the interview process, because something could happen in the interview process and you have to start over. So you don't want to have to start from square one with having no interviews set up. So you want to continuously apply. And I mean, to answer your question, it really depends on what information is out there. So like I mentioned earlier in the stream, with the applications that I've worked with and like the platforms, it's automatically listed on the job posting when it opens and when it closes. So read through that and determine how long it's been or how early in the process you're applying it to. I would say if a job has been posted for more than a month, if it is something that like you could do but you're not super passionate about, it's probably not worth it to apply because they likely already have someone else going through the process. However, if you feel like this is my dream job, I'm a great fit for this role, I could be the unicorn they're looking for, then apply to it. So I usually think that month-long period is like the longest that you would want to apply to a job. Ideally, you identify organizations that you want to work with and you set up job interest alerts through their careers page. So many platforms allow you to set up an automatic email that will come out if a job in your like preferred area is posted. So for example, if I were applying to HR jobs, I could go onto a website, indicate that I'm interested in HR jobs. If one is posted with HR as a tag, I would get an email as soon as it went live and I could apply at the very beginning. So if it's possible to set up a job interest alert, do that as soon as possible.
That makes a lot of sense. We got one last one here. Twinkle Star, which one to choose, school scholarship or job offer?
It depends on your circumstance.
Yeah, I'd say that's unanswerable. It really depends on your goals.
Yeah.
And then on, the details of your situation. It could go either way, depending on what, first of all, starting with what you want to do and, where you are and how to do it.
Yep.
But that makes a lot of sense. Thank you to Tommy, who, just another one that just rolls off the tongue. That's awesome. Hey, if you're gonna pick a handle to get on the internet with, you might as well make it one for the books. Awesome. Thank you to everybody who participated. We have got 44 people here. You guys are awesome. Hopefully this was helpful. Now we are back in a couple of weeks, I believe, in 2 weeks from today. So if you have any questions that you would like Abby and myself to answer, kind of both at the same time, get two different perspectives there, come back in a couple of weeks and we will do our best to help you. In the meantime, best of luck to everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining in.
Yeah, take care. We'll see you soon.